article, Haven't We Seen This Before? Sustaining a Vision in Teacher Education for Progressive Teaching Practice. This is a really good article because it deals with how teachers see new trends come in, especially when dealing with effective instruction. And you see it all the time. As a teacher, you're going to see more and more of these ideas and trends come through. It states in the article in the very first paragraphs that progressive practices come in cycles and under the banner of education reform, and all of a sudden they gain rapid support. This happens a lot that we see. It happens a lot because whenever we see, we'll all of a sudden hear, MCT's coming out. Everybody goes, we need to go do this. We need to go do MCT. And then there's huge support for these. Common Core is another thing. Everything all of a sudden starts popping up, and then what happens is a bandwagon movement. The article talks about that, and then it continues on. A central issue is the challenge to teacher education programs to resist the swing in the pendulum. What that means is like a clock with a big pendulum swinging left and right. That education will move from left to right over and over and over again, and we need to resist some of these big swings. These practices include uniform reform of curriculum, pass for drill-like student response, and whole group instruction. Now, the article then talks about two things, and it talks about open education and differentiated instruction as offshoots of the progressive movement of the 1920s. Open education represents a reform effort that gained swift popularity but lost momentum when competing interests, including political trends, came into play. They note that advocates of open education see the integration of learning, its wholeness, as an essential base for personalizing the educational process. Basic skills are considered fundamental, but never in isolation from other learning experiences. Now, differentiation bearing a strong resemblance to open education, particularly with respect to focus on every student, has been characterized as an approach in teaching in which teachers proactively modify curricula, teaching methods, resources, learning activities, and student products to address the diverse needs of individual students. Now, notice this right here. In today's standards-driven environment, advocates of differentiation ultimately may face challenges similar to those faced by open education proponents. So, as open education moved to the 1970s, differentiated instruction has risen during the 2000s, or turn of the century. But it's always been struggled because now with the new state standards and No Child Left Behind, the idea of the individual child is being pushed away and more towards everyone passing a state test. This next section right here of this article deals with the cycles of progressive education. Instead of reading it to you, you see that they mention Dewey. Dewey helped lay the groundwork for progressive education. Your next assignment will spring off of this, and you'll have a Dewey paper. And it also talks about that John Dewey rises up in the 1940s, that things kind of stagnated, but Sputnik in the 1950s and 1960s really just pushed everything forward with the space race. In attempting to reintroduce progressive ideas, the network of progressive educators drafted a statement of principles. This goes beyond this article and how we need to look at whether this progressive movement has died or not, but we'll see as that moves on. Cuban suggests that although the movement did have some impact, long-lasting effects were minimal. The lack of staying power of progressive education may be due to a number of factors, including political climate. And now the article talks about the open education origins, aims, and practices, so you get a real good idea of the open education movement into the instruction. Scrolls down, and it talks about students develop new knowledge through the process of active construction in which they develop and integrate a network of associations. The article then starts talking about the 60s and 70s and the political climate, and then I like this quote: a bandwagon effect is in which rapid adoptions of new practices are quickly embraced by school districts, and a flurry of workshops are given to bring teachers on board as quickly as possible. So later on in your education career, if you're asked to write a comprehensive exam answer, you may wish to use the word bandwagon effect when you talk about any kind of new movement within education. We see this a lot. Bandwagon effects happen a lot. Progressive practices that were represented by open education did not completely evaporate. Individual teachers across the United States continue to engage students in meaningful long-term projects and community social action initiatives and provide intellectually stimulated, highly motivating classroom environments. Smith, of course, in 1997 says maybe we need to look at this again, this idea of bringing meaningful instruction to the individualized student. Differentiated instruction comes in after the 1970s of the open education movement. By 1995, differentiation had become a buzzword used frequently in reports on schools. Approaches such as enrichment triad model, the Purdue three-stage model, the individualized program planning, and the autonomous learner model all concentrate on modifications of content, process, and product at a personal level. Although these models initially gained quick acceptance in the classrooms because of the differentiated instruction they provide for individual gifted students, these remain concerned that perhaps modification of the content dimensions left too much for teachers' imaginations. Ooh, I saw that and I was like, I think that teachers need to have more open curriculum where you can change and do what you want to. I think we are way too rigid, but that's something that you may want to think about. The article talks about open education, shifts over to differentiated instruction, which are all offshoots of the progressive movement, and then it starts going into here, how can we have an understanding of the buzzword resistant? And the article then starts giving some highlights for education to decide how they're going to deal with buzzwords. So one is more integration of, and that's where this article continues on. So I really like this article because it talks about, so whenever you read it, hopefully you got all this. But the first thing they talked about was changes in education and how they continue to move. And they gave you a little bit of highlight of the progressive movement and Dewey. And then they said, okay, the progressive movement got to the 1940s and kind of went away. And then it kind of popped back up in the 70s with the open-ended. And then all of a sudden it popped back up in the 1990s with differentiated instruction, which goes to about 2005. And then it kind of goes away with state testing. So you kind of see, and that's what they're saying in the whole article, that everything comes back and forth. Everything is like a pendulum that swings back and forth. So how can we resist these changes? And the article highlights several points and gives a lot of good facts on here. Connecting learning theory to clinical experience is a significant way. And there's more examples here. Developing collaborative work cultures, developing deeper understandings. So instead of us jumping at Common Core and jumping at everything that people throw out, maybe we need to go by some of these guidelines and definitely look at this right here. Collaborative understandings of ways in which physical environments can promote a shared sense of community. So you'd actually say, well, if we're going to do Common Core, how's this going to affect our actual school building? How's it going to affect our actual students? So just looking at all these ideas. And so just a really good article. You may want to think about it. Maybe want to read the whole thing again. But you're going to have an assignment based on John Dewey. I want to make sure we bring him up. So if you have any questions, just make sure you read the article. And hopefully my notes and highlights helps you understand it better. Thank you.